I just wanted to play a naughty game, but ended up being transported into the game world as the main villain, Demon Lord. Was I really just a gaming otaku? As usual, I opened up the game planning to capture each of the beautiful female characters to unlock the exquisite CGs. However, things took a turn for the worse as I suddenly found myself transported into the game world and into the body of the supervillain Lucius Morla. As far as I knew, in the later stages of production, a group of heroes of unknown origin appeared from the skies. Traitors frequently arose from within the demon army, and the imprisoned women who were once at the mercy of the player suddenly became goddesses and destroyed the Demon Lord's city. Knowing the bleak ending that awaited Demon Lord, I suddenly became uneasy. Who came up with this ridiculous plot? But then I calmed down and realized that the game's story had only just begun. There was still time to salvage the situation. All I had to do was become a Demon Lord who wasn't so naughty, and perhaps I could change the outcome. Just then, my goblin henchmen reported to me that they had captured a Saintess who was as beautiful as a cow. But to their surprise, the Saintess was strong-willed and refused to yield, even taunting my minions by saying, "Bring it on, you lecherous demons." Upon hearing this, my second-in-command, the dark elf Flem, took out his small whip and prepared to teach the Saintess a lesson. But the Saintess was unafraid and even challenged them to use all their tricks, saying she would never surrender. Flem smirked and lifted the Saintess's chin, saying, "I really like your stubborn attitude. I hope you can keep it up." Then, she used magic to activate an instant teleportation circle and sent the Saintess outside the palace. The Saintess was now somewhat uneasy because in her mind, Demon Lord was not just an ordinary goblin, but a much larger and more powerful one. Although the Saintess was very afraid at this moment, she secretly encouraged herself. Even if it were that size, I still couldn't be afraid. In this way, Flem brought the Saintess into the palace and stood her in front of Lucius. "My lord Lucius, Saintess Polly is here for you to dispose of as you wish." Unexpectedly, when the Saintess saw the Demon Lord, her face blushed. Why is this Demon Lord different from the description in the book? Such temperament and handsome face. Then she shook her head and thought, this must be the Demon Lord's illusion. I need to be more sober. Meanwhile, the Demon Lord looked at the Saintess's curvy figure and thought, this is too unfair. After calming down, the Demon Lord wiped his nosebleed and reminded himself not to be deceived by her innocent appearance. As the most alarmingly evil female character of the game's early stages, provided she dies or degenerates to a certain degree, she'll soon deify, becoming a six-winged angel who will obliterate the demon city. So I absolutely cannot be indecent with her. At this moment, the Saintess angrily told the Demon Lord to stop pretending and reveal his true nature. Whether it's a strange pink potion that affects the body or a brainwashing magic groin pattern, none of it will work on me. If I shout stop once, I lose. The Demon Lord was about to explain, but Flem spoke up and said, if my lord Demon Lord needs it, I can research and develop it now. The Demon Lord held his forehead and said he didn't need those things. However, the Saintess misunderstood and thought he was referring to something else. You don't need those things? Are you going to use that? She immediately imagined herself becoming the Demon Lord's pet and shouted that she absolutely didn't want to be like that. The Demon Lord was helpless. What is this Saintess thinking about? Flem, seeing the Saintess's rude behavior, raised his small whip and snapped it at her. The Saintess closed her eyes in fear, expecting to be whipped any moment. After waiting for a while, she opened her eyes in confusion, only to see that the Demon Lord had caught the whip and protected her. However, the Demon Lord seemed a bit uneasy. He would be suspected if he rashly protected the enemy like this. Flem, who was also present, became nervous as well. If things continued like this, Lucius, the Demon Lord, would definitely be displeased. Feeling regretful, the Demon Lord awkwardly coughed and instructed Flem to take the Saintess to the room, while he himself would arrange for her punishment. Upon hearing that she was being taken to his room, the Saintess panicked. Was he really going to do something to her? However, Flem, being sensible, took the Saintess to bathe first before leading her to the Demon Lord's prepared room. Recalling the Saintess's attitude earlier, Flem became quite unhappy. How could this captive human Saintess dare to covet Lucius's attention? Even if Lucius needed someone to serve him, it could only be Flem. Meanwhile, the Saintess was also contemplating why the Demon Lord had acted in such a way. Nevertheless, she secretly made up her mind to face whatever may come, even if it meant going through hell. After drying her hair, she arrived in the room that was prepared for her. She praised the luxuriousness while cursing the Demon Lord for his sins, saying that the soft bed was there to lure her. She immediately stated that she, as a Saintess, would never succumb to such low tactics. But after 3 seconds, she fell onto the bed and rolled around joyfully, thinking that the Demon Lord was not as bad as the rumors suggested. However, she suddenly got up, wondering how she could have had such thoughts. Was she being blinded by the luxurious items, or was the Demon Lord using some kind of mind magic to manipulate her? She thought that it started with the temptation of simple objects and would gradually increase until she became the Demon Lord's plaything. Determined not to forget her mission, the Saintess raised her little fist and cheered herself on, but decided to rest for a while longer. Eventually, she fell asleep with a silly smile on her face, finding the bed too comfortable. She woke up the next day. Not until the morning sunlight shone on her face did Saintess wake up suddenly, wondering how she fell asleep. Damn it, they purposely arranged the bed so soft and delicate to corrupt me, she thought to herself while she was lamenting. Interrogating. Flem walked in and said, Miss Saintess, it seems you are quite satisfied with this room. Then he threw her a set of clothes and added, Lucius has designated you to serve him, so put on this maid uniform. As Saintess picked up the clothes, she realized it was a maid uniform. I see. They want to humiliate me by making me wear a maid uniform and treating me like a maid, she thought, feeling that they underestimated her. Saintess then put on the white maid uniform without hesitation and said, wearing a maid uniform is not shameful to me. Flem, who was standing next to her, thought about how the demon lord had changed recently. He stopped Flem from interrogating prisoners, prohibited him from using torture, and even prepared such a good room for the prisoner. Flem wondered, is this punishment just changing the prisoner's clothes? Suddenly, Saintess screamed, what is this? How can there be such a maid uniform? It's too shameful. Flem was stunned to see Saintess's embarrassed reaction. He realized that the demon lord had already broken through Saintess's psychological defense line, and just changing her clothes was enough to shock her. With a mocking tone, Flem said to Saintess, are you feeling it now, Miss Saintess? We don't need torture or tricks to have a means to corrupt you. Saintess blushed after hearing this. But this is the Almighty's wisdom, the Saintess said in a cold voice, walking towards me in her high heels. Stop pretending, you hypocritical demon. As I turned to look at Saintess, I couldn't help but feel happy seeing her beautiful figure in the maid uniform. Upon seeing this, Saintess coldly snorted, I never expected you to have such a hobby. Demon Lord, bring it on, no matter what it is. Then she slammed her hands on the table. Isn't that what you want to do? Just then, the door was pushed open and my subordinate demon Fly Bradley walked in. He quickly understood the situation in front of him and retreated, closing the door behind him. Sorry, I came too early, he said. Seeing that my subordinate had misunderstood, I quickly called him back. But Saintess was even more furious. Are you so depraved that you want others to watch? She exclaimed. What are you even thinking in your head? Just then, Flem walked in holding the latest military intelligence map, and we began discussing our plans to attack the humans. But Saintess was suspicious. He's actually letting me listen to these military secrets. Does he think I'm not a threat, or is there something else going on? When she saw the markings on the map, she covered her mouth in shock. The Demon Lord's army would launch a full-scale invasion of human territory, and it would be too much for them to handle. Thinking this, Saintess nervously breathed heavily and trembled involuntarily. After looking at the distracted Saintess, I remembered the game's original storyline and how easy it was to defeat the human army and capture the elf princess. But I refused. I would only allow the Demon Lord's army to be driven back to their homeland after being defeated. That way, I wouldn't have to worry about triggering a death ending. Then I pointed to a spot on the map and ordered Bradley to lead his men to attack the invincible fort, which was the highest difficulty. Bradley broke out in cold sweat when he heard this, and quickly said that he did not have the ability to carry out such an attack. But inwardly, I smirked. I had intentionally sent him to his death. Although Bradley was ostensibly loyal to me, he actually served Hell's Demon Lord of the Flies. So, I lied to him, saying that the invincible fort was an empty castle left by the human army. After hearing my explanation, Flem actually felt remorseful. As the chief strategist of Lord Lucius, she should have known this important information. It was a serious dereliction of duty. She even imagined how I would punish her for it. However, I didn't pay attention to her strange expression and instead pointed to Bradley, telling him to organize a vanguard to attack Fort Invincible during daylight hours. Bradley was about to object, but Flem stepped on his stool and asked if he was doubting Demon Lord. She then pointed at the maid standing nearby, saying that her embarrassed expression was proof of her guilt. The Saintess quickly denied it, shaking her head. Looking at the Saintess in front of him, Bradley realized that she was actually the Saintess who had been captured a few days ago, and she had become so docile after just a few days. He considered that Demon Lord was a flawless manipulator, and maybe the plan could actually work. Bradley became meek and submissive and went to prepare as ordered. After Bradley left, I sighed deeply, but inside, I sinisterly thought that the empty fort strategy was all just my fabrication. If I made up any more stories, I might even start to believe them myself. However, I didn't notice the Saintess looking at me in horror. Why did Demon Lord know that Fort Invincible was an empty fort? Who leaked the information? Then the Saintess questioned me in a condescending manner, asking if we had captured any other high-ranking officials of the Allied forces. I quickly explained that we had only captured her so far, and that there were no other high-ranking officials. However, the Saintess began to imagine again and wondered if Demon Lord had hypnotized her and forced her to give up the information while she was sleeping. Thinking about this, the Saintess angrily slapped the table and began to cry. I didn't understand what was happening and wondered what was going on, but from this perspective, it seemed too wicked. I tried to calm down and not think of anything else, as it could result in death. At this moment, the Saintess stood up and shouted, "Do you think the invincible fort will be so easily conquered by you? It's a super defense system that has been built for 1,000 years. I excitedly stood up and replied, "That's great." I then placed my hand on the Saintess's shoulder and continued, "Sending the Demon Fly army to attack during the day is like handing them their heads. Don't you agree?" Feeling intimidated by my strong words, the Saintess momentarily lost her confidence. However, she quickly regained her composure and responded fearlessly, "You're right, your attack is doomed to fail, but we have the support of the dwarf tribe as well." I became even more excited after hearing this and pressed the Saintess down onto the table, exclaiming, "Exactly! With the combination of of human alchemy and dwarf explosives. You've created the alchemy cannon that can destroy targets dozens of miles away. I burst out laughing after speaking. You tell me, how can you lose with a wave of soaring wyverns? Seeing me behave this way, the Saintess became frightened and her legs began to tremble. She couldn't understand why I was so confident and whether there was anything to worry about. In the cage at the front line of the demon army, there is a human prisoner named Saintess. She is currently imagining the rewards she will receive after successfully advising the powerful bull demon lord. The thought of it excites her. Bradley then walked over and interrupted her thoughts, saying, "Put away your dirty thoughts. Your plan has been rejected. Instead, the almighty demon lord has tasked me with launching a frontal attack against the invincible fort in 3 days." Saintess was shocked and grabbed onto the railing. "A frontal attack during the day? How could we possibly conquer the fort?" she exclaimed. Bradley then sternly replied, "I want you to come up with a plan on how to successfully breach the invincible fort. If you can't, then I'll turn you into my puppet collectible." Upon hearing this, Saintess' legs gave way and she fell to the ground. Don't tell me he's a nuisance and the demon lord plans to get him eliminated. However, she suddenly seemed to understand something and said, "So that's what the demon lord meant. It's an honor to have a spiritual fusion with the demon lord." She then patted her chest and confidently said, "Don't worry, I'll come up with a plan in 3 days. 3 days later, a thick fog arose around the invincible fort, causing Bradley to be perplexed. Saintess explained the reason behind it. The demon lord had likely taken into account that the fortress was close to the sea, and as such easily prone to fog due to condensation. With this, even a frontal brigade could remain undetected. Nature couldn't provide better cover. Saintess also mentioned that it was the dwarves' wine god festival today. The alcohol-loving dwarves were getting drunk, and even the dwarf princess, Priscilla, had passed out on the ground. When she tried to get up for another drink, a bucket of cold water was poured on her, shocking her back to sobriety. Furious, she demanded to know who dared to pour cold water on her. Just then, the marshal shouted at her and the other drunken dwarves, warning them that if the demon tribe attacked, they would be helpless in their inebriated state. As if on cue, a pink slime fell from the sky, landing on the princess. As she struggled to get it off, she realized that the marshal was now surrounded by more slimes, and she looked up to see that Bradley and his men had attacked and breached the fortress. Bradley held up the pink slime, sneering at the princess, and then squeezed it tightly, causing numerous tentacles to sprout from the ground and ensnare the princess's legs. And thus, even the dwarf princess was captured. I am leisurely enjoying afternoon tea in the demon lord's castle, while the Saintess seems puzzled by my behavior. Today was supposed to be the day we attacked fort, but here I am eating sweets without a care in the world. Perhaps I view Rasma Plains as no different from cake and believe it's all mine for the taking. As I notice the Saintess eyeing the cake with drool hanging from her mouth, I offer her a piece, but she hesitates, saying that there might be some kind of sleeping powder or potion inside. She puts on a show of refusing to eat it, but soon enough, she caves and starts raving about how delicious it is. Watching her eat, I sip my coffee and comment that she shouldn't underestimate me just because I offered her a piece of cake, but she interrupts, asking if I'm not worried about Invincible Fort. After all, it has stood for thousands of years and is practically impregnable. The demons are sure to meet with bloodshed if they try to attack it head-on. I smile and ask if she thinks the Ninth Army can't face the fort's defenses and still claim victory. I assure her that she will hear some uplifting news today. Just then, Flem bursts into the hall and runs up to me, gasping for breath. She tells me that everything has gone according to my plan, and our troops have already conquered fort in half a day. As Flem praises me in her mind and marvels at my towering figure, I am left trembling with excitement and disbelief. I can't believe my haphazard plan actually worked. Fog breakout, back as fast, my expectations. What's this bullshit? This isn't what I wanted to damn hear. At this moment, Flem was sneering as he spoke to the Saintess. Judging by the current situation, we will be able to successfully occupy half of the Rasma Plains within half a month. Upon hearing this news, the Saintess's legs went weak and she collapsed to the ground. I was also frightened and sweating profusely, thinking to myself that things were not looking good. One of the conditions for the Saintess's deification was to occupy half of the Rasma Plains, and once she became a saint, I would die. I quickly drank some coffee to calm myself down, while Flem, who was next to me, was imagining things again despite my silence. He believed that the Demon Lord didn't care about such small matters, and that drinking coffee was more important than occupying half of the Rasma Plains. As the military and political leader, I couldn't afford to panic during emergencies, and I needed to maintain a sense of composure even when there were minor victories. I was truly impressed by the Demon Lord's leadership. I bowed to Flem to show that I understood the Demon Lord's intentions. Although I couldn't understand what Flem had understood, the most important thing at the moment was to do something to remedy the situation. I summoned Flem and gave him an order to withdraw Bradley's troops. Upon hearing this, both Flem and the Saintess were stunned. However, Bradley was furious when he received the order to retreat, and he cursed at me. The silly Minotaur next to him didn't pay attention to him, but sent a cute messenger to deliver the order to retreat. Bradley was so angry that his hair was standing on end. Didn't you listen to what I said? I wasn't finished speaking. However, the Minotaur's large hand patted him on the head and comforted him. The Demon Lord must have his reasons. Calm down. Bradley, who had calmed down, turned to Listus, the human, and asked her to use her cunning mind to analyze the demon lord's intentions. Listis furrowed her brows and thought, you must have offended the demon lord. Ah, I see now. The demon lord's wisdom is like a trickle of water that irrigates my withered mind. This is a brilliant move of retreat as a form of advancement. Bradley and Bull Demon don't understand. Lytis pulled out a map from her waistband and analyzed it while pointing at it. Although we could quickly conquer most of the Rasma plains by advancing directly, what demon lord really wants is to slowly eat away at the entire Rasma. Bradley understood the intention and ordered his subordinates to retreat. When he heard the news of the retreat from Flem, I finally breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, even though we had to cut our losses, if the Saintess deified, I would have been done for. But I hope there won't be any more surprises. Unexpectedly, Flem spoke up again. Oh, by the way, there's another surprise. Bradley sent a gift with the battle report. Flem said Bradley had captured a girl as a gift for me. When I saw who it was, I felt like hitting someone. You call this a gift? A nuclear bomb? Don't forget, the dwarf princess is just like the Saintess. Once she dies or falls completely, she'll immediately deify and tear apart the demon city. And wasn't this character supposed to be captured in the mid-game? How is the game progressing so quickly now? At this point, Flem expressed his desire to interrogate the dwarf princess, saying, I've always wanted to see how a stubborn and foul-tempered dwarf behaves. After speaking, he took out a small whip and walked towards the princess who was hanging there. The Saintess, who was nearby, clenched her fists in anger at the scene. Even Princess Priscilla has been captured. Can the human coalition really not stop the demon lord's army? When she thought about how Priscilla might be tortured, she silently shed tears. In order to survive, I spoke up and stopped Flem. No, I'll personally interrogate the dwarf princess. Flem was taken aback by my words, but immediately agreed and began to imagine what he had done wrong in his intelligence work. Does demon lord think that even a female pig is stronger than me? Flem felt terrible at the thought. I didn't know what Flem was imagining and asked her to leave. Flem heard me and left with her head down. At this moment, the dwarf princess was tied up with ropes and couldn't move. The more she struggled, the tighter the ropes became. The damn demon attacked during the wine festival. If only she hadn't drunk the high concentration alcohol mixed with water. But she had to drink, and just then I walked in with the Saintess. Priscilla was a little surprised to see us. She had heard news that the Saintess had been captured. Did she betray us? I approached her and removed the cloth from her mouth. Unexpectedly, as soon as I took it off, she started yelling at the Saintess. What's with that maid outfit? Are you really a traitor? After she finished her rant, I told her that I wanted to ask the princess some questions. But before I could finish, Priscilla started yelling at me. Dream on. We will never give you the secret of our dwarf gunpowder weapons, even if we die. She tried to stand up, but the ropes around her became tighter and tighter until she made a strange noise and collapsed on the bed. She stubbornly yelled out, I'll never be like that shameless maid and give away everything in my head to you demons. After I made Priscilla cry, I took her to the largest wine cellar in the demon lord's castle. As soon as she entered, her eyes lit up and tears flowed from the corners of her mouth. What a huge wine cellar, she exclaimed. Seeing her excited expression, I poured her a glass of black beer made from black malt that the dwarf tribe had probably never heard of. Would you like a glass? I asked. Priscilla's eyes lit up, and she reached out to take the glass. Suddenly, she backed away. We dwarves embody integrity, and will never surrender to you because of a glass of beer, she exclaimed. But of course, the most important thing was the alcohol. A few seconds later, she snatched the beer away and brought it to her nose to smell it. How could this black beer have such a strong aroma? She marveled. She then took a big sip and exclaimed, this taste is too good. It's slightly sour and a bit sweet. I can't stop drinking it. Seeing Priscilla's appearance, I secretly laughed to myself. The dwarf princess was easily controlled. Priscilla, who had finished drinking her dark beer, was still talking tough. It's just a slightly novel beer. Do you think that can make me submit to you? As soon as I saw this, I immediately clapped my hands twice. The door was immediately opened. Outside stood a group of goblin minions. I pointed at the minions and said to Priscilla, if we combine the brewing techniques of the dwarves with our own, we might be able to unravel even more mysteries about alcohol. As long as you agree, the entire winery and the brewing masters of the demon lord's army can be at your disposal. Priscilla couldn't believe what she had just heard. The whole winery at my disposal? Does that mean I'll have an endless supply of fine wine? And so, the resolute dwarf princess became my chief brewing maid. She even proudly recounted the events to the Saintess the next day. The Saintess was incredulous and asked Priscilla, so you became a maid for the demon lord just like that? But Priscilla said, there was no other choice. He offered me too much. No dwarf can resist the temptation of alcohol, and I am the chief brewer. As soon as she finished speaking, she pointed her finger at the Saintess and accused her. I heard from those demons that it was you who leaked the secrets, so my drinking has nothing to do with me. It's all your fault. The Saintess looked self-blaming and said that she didn't voluntarily leak the information. Moreover, the demon lord was not as gentle as he seemed on the surface. In fact, he had powerful hypnotic magic and unfathomable intelligence. She must have been under his mental spell and involuntarily leaked the information. The Saintess grabbed Priscilla's hand and advised her to be careful of the demon lord. She warned that while today he may have her researching wine, tomorrow he could have her unknowingly working on conquering the Rasma plains, and it could escalate from there to even more unreasonable demands. Priscilla, with a puzzled puzzled expression, wondered what was going on in the Saintess's head, but she didn't think the Saintess was lying based on her expression. However, Priscilla didn't want to give up the winery, so she came up with an excuse and said that she wasn't just making wine, but rather she was trying to deceive the Demon Lord. The Saintess was curious and asked Priscilla what she planned to do after deceiving the Demon Lord. Priscilla was momentarily stumped, but then came up with a plan to lower the Demon Lord's guard and destroy the artillery when the time was right. The room became quiet after Priscilla finished speaking, and she wasn't sure if the Saintess believed her story. However, the Saintess excitedly hugged Priscilla and revealed that she was also a spy lurking beside the Demon Lord, and her goal was to retrieve Eugene's holy staff. Priscilla was confused since she thought the holy staff belonged to the church and didn't understand how such an important artifact could end up in the hands of the Demon Lord. She also couldn't believe that the Saintess willingly let herself be captured. Nonetheless, the Saintess suggested that Priscilla should destroy the artillery while she retrieved the holy staff, and then they would escape the Demon Lord's city together. The Saintess hugged Priscilla again and said she would start working with the Demon Lord from tomorrow onwards, trying to manipulate him and create opportunities to achieve their goals. Priscilla weakly gestured to be released since she felt like she was suffocating, and the Saintess let her go. Unbeknownst to them, every word they spoke was overheard by my goblin minions. They reported the news to me immediately, and I laughed at how my garden had become more entertaining than my wildest imaginations. If I put the two of them here with me, sooner or later there will definitely be trouble. Why don't I just send them back to the Order Alliance? As expected of the two of them, they can think of things that even I don't. The remaining alchemy cannons are also a problem. It would be nice if they could be destroyed as well. If one alchemy is not enough, why don't I let them burn the entire armory? And it would be better if they burn down the entire Demon King's city. One of my goblin minions looked puzzled and said, I do understand every sentence, but I don't understand why the Demon King is saying these things. Am I allowed to hear this? I smirked at the goblin and said, the information you provide is valuable, and this matter is very, very important. So, can you keep it a secret for me? And with a wave of my hand, I turned the goblin into fragments. Since they have an idea to create a problem, then I'll give them a chance. I ordered one of my goblin minions to ask the Saintess to trim the garden. When she heard the task, she was disappointed, thinking, I'm already prepared to be toyed with, and they're only asking me to trim the garden. The nearby goblin reminded her, Demon Lord told me to remind you that the loot warehouse is not far from the garden. You must not go near there. Upon hearing this, the Saintess's eyes lit up, and she exclaimed, Loot warehouse? I remember Orkin's rod was there. Unexpectedly, even the Demon Lord makes careless mistakes. Excitedly, the Saintess headed straight to the garden to pretend to trim it, but she had no idea that the plants were unlike any she had seen before. Ignoring this fact, she pulled out her large scissors and snipped off the flowers in front of her. Suddenly, the vines around her started to move, and a giant Trayan appeared, wrapping her up in its vines before throwing her out. As she got up, she saw the fruits around her starting to shake. In no time, the fruits exploded, drenching the Saintess in juice. Seeing this, she cursed me, saying, no wonder it's a product of the demon realm. Even the plants are as dirty as Demon Lord. As she tried to leave, she realized that the juice was corroding her clothes. In her panic, she accidentally touched something strange, and a giant man-eating flower emerged, tying her up with its tongue and playing with her before tossing her into the bushes. Even so, she did not give up on finding the warehouse, but at this moment, the Saintess suddenly smelled a very fragrant smell and found that it was coming from a white flower ahead. The Saintess didn't expect that there would be such a pure white flower in the Demon Lord's castle. In the dark environment of the strange plants, it was surprising that the plants could still bloom so vigorously and express their lives like she was trapped in enemy territory. Just then, a voice suddenly came from behind. The Saintess turned around and was surprised to see the Pope here. Could it be that the Pope was also captured? However, the Pope comforted her. Child, everything is over. After speaking, he took the Saintess and flew into the air. The Saintess looked down and found that there was no one in the Demon Lord's camp, and it was in a shambles. The Pope pointed to the little angel flying in the sky and explained to the Saintess, our holy army has defeated the Demon Lord's army, and the Demon Lord's castle has been conquered by our army. Upon hearing this, the Saintess was confused. When did this happen? The Demon Lord has been captured by us and is now undergoing final judgment. The Pope finished speaking and signaled the Saintess to look back. The Saintess turned around and saw the Demon Lord bound to a pillar. Then, unable to believe it, she covered her mouth. Pope, we really captured the Demon Lord. The Pope handed the Saintess a small whip and said, of course it's true. We leave this Demon Lord to you to dispose of. Do whatever you like to him. After hearing this, the Saintess was stunned and then smiled, taking the small whip and lashing out at the Demon Lord. Scream, scream. No one will come to save you no matter how loud you scream. The louder you scream, the more excited I become. However, little did she know that all of this was just a dream, and in reality, I watched the Saintess silly smile and couldn't help but give her a chance to go get the Orkin's rod. Why is it so useless? Beside me, Flem looked at the Saintess in disbelief, who was so disrespectful to the Demon Lord in her dream. Flem was so angry that she immediately took out the small whip and wanted to lash out at the Saintess. I hurriedly stopped her. The Saintess in her sleep tightly grasped the blanket and talked in her sleep. Yes, that's the expression. Don't you feel the wonder of being a man? After telling Priscilla about about how she had dreamt of spanking me, the Saintess couldn't contain her shame and burst into tears while hugging Priscilla, saying that she wanted to die together with her. Priscilla quickly tried to comfort her, saying that it was just a hallucination, and asked if she had any strange fantasies about me. Sobbing, the Saintess replied, "I didn't even think about having any fantasies about him." Priscilla was dumbfounded by her response and thought, what the hell is running through that mind of hers? Then, the dwarf princess laughed proudly, saying that she had found something very useful when she went to the winery today. She pulled a mini shovel out of her pants and said that she would use it to dig a tunnel from their bedroom to the armory. She was confident that they could take Orkin's rod or destroy the alchemy cannons after that. The Saintess thought that the dwarf princess was insane and wanted to continue with her suicide plan. When I found out about their plan, I strongly suspected that they had gone crazy during their transport, so I decided to help them out and call the goblin. However, when I asked the dwarf princess to forge something for me, she refused, saying that her dwarves would never do anything for me except brewing alcohol. But when the goblin suggested that they could go to the warehouse to pick materials, the two of them exchanged a glance. The dwarf princess thought to herself, I'm sure she's up to no good again, while the Saintess began to shed tears and imagine some strange scenes. Soon, the dwarf princess arrived at the warehouse, and as soon as she entered, she saw something familiar but couldn't name it. Just then, the tentacle suddenly shot out and slowly wrapped around her body. It continued to coil around her until Priscilla realized that it was, in fact, the lamia skeleton, a first-rate lash material even when unprocessed. At that moment, the lamia skeleton suddenly tightened and threw Princess Priscilla harshly to the ground. But when she lifted her head, she saw a piece of natural magic material that would be present even if the entire mine was emptied, a soul mother stone. Then she looked around and saw precious treasures such as Terra stone and lava heart. At this point, Priscilla began to salivate with happiness and really wanted to join them. And at this moment, a holy staff emitted a dazzling light. Priscilla exclaimed, "What is this thing? It's going to blind me. I can't believe it noticed my presence. It seems like it's the will of the Lord for us to meet." Priscilla thought to herself, feeling speechless. "That's suspicious. How could you not notice such a bright light? Turn it off quickly," she continued, looking at the staff that was now extinguished. "Could this be the Orkin's rod, the one that countless powerful beings have used?" Priscilla asked, grasping the staff at once. "At the request of the Saintess, I will take you back now," she said to the staff. "How are you going to take me out of here?" The staff replied, "You don't want to be discovered by the demons while carrying me around, do you? It's best to hide me on your person." "But, Sir Staff," Priscilla said, "according to the Demon Lord's orders, I have to stay here. I will pretend to work hard at the forge during the day and then sneak you out during the evening break." The staff looked at Priscilla's small chest and agreed. As for where to hide the staff, Priscilla wondered for a moment before tucking it under her skirt and entering the Demon Lord's workshop. Coincidentally, Flem happened to be there on patrol. Priscilla panicked and tried to slip away, hoping not to be noticed, but Flem saw her and said, "Madam Flem, it's the dwarf princess our forces took prisoner. His Supreme Majesty sent her over after hearing she had a knack for forgery. It's Princess Priscilla," Flem realized, and smacked her on the buttocks. "In such a short time, even the most stubborn dwarf princess can be tamed. You truly are the Demon Lord." Priscilla blushed and asked, "What do you want?" Flem caressed Priscilla and replied, "Of course, I won't do anything to you, but the opportunity to train a dwarf princess is quite tempting." Flem suddenly felt a large and hard object. "What are you hiding?" Flem asked. He then pulled out a staff with a strong divine aura. Priscilla was stunned by the sight of the holy staff, but it also put her at ease. "If worst comes to worst, I'll just hand over the thing," Priscilla said. "It's a test from the Lord for me to endure humiliation." But Priscilla was not amused. "Is this how all members of your church behave?" she asked. "We can't give it up," Priscilla explained. "If they find out I stole the holy staff, the entire vineyard might be taken back by the Demon Lord." Priscilla was in tears at the thought of it. Suddenly, she snatched the staff from Flem. "That's right," she said. "I will turn this holy staff, brimming with divine aura, into a weapon to present to His Highness, the Demon Lord." The staff sensed that something was amiss and cried out, "Stop. This isn't a test from the Lord for me at all," it exclaimed. "You must be a demon in disguise trying to interrogate me." Priscilla took out a huge hammer and dealt the final blow to the staff. Meanwhile, Saintess was waiting for Priscilla in the garden, wondering what Flem was up to. She suspected that Priscilla might have been drugged by Flem, but the next second, Priscilla appeared behind her, unharmed. Upon hearing the good news that Priscilla had managed to steal the holy staff, Saintess was overjoyed. But when Priscilla showed her the staff, Saintess screamed in horror. "What happened to the holy staff?" she asked Priscilla. Priscilla waved her hand dismissively. "I did it to deceive the demon clan," she explained, removing the staff's cover to reveal its modified form. Then she pressed on the staff's eyes, and it shot out strange substances. Priscilla smirked mischievously as she continued to modify the staff, turning it into a shovel. Saintess was panic-stricken at the sight of the modified staff. I, on the other hand, saw this bizarre scene in the magic image and decided to stop the nonsense. A few hours later, I summoned Priscilla to my presence. I praised her for her excellent craftsmanship and dwarven forging techniques, but Priscilla scoffed at my compliments and was about to leave. Flem was furious at her rudeness and was about to discipline her, but I stopped him. Instead, I told Priscilla that I wanted her to help me manufacture weapons of war and entrusted her with the alchemy cannon. Priscilla was stunned when she heard this. If I were to entrust the alchemy cannon to her completely, she could dismantle it without any issue. But if she agreed to my request, would she become my plaything in the future? As she was lost in thought, Flem looked at me in amazement, her eyes full of doubt as to why I trusted this dwarf princess so much. However, as my subordinate, she must uphold my dignity. As long as Priscilla dares to refuse me, Flem has a reason to properly train the dwarf princess.